In 1911, a Colt pistol fired 6,000 rounds without a single malfunction. A century later, a new service pistol was logging a stoppage every 300 rounds. Same job, same basic physics, wildly different numbers. Reliability testing is supposed to settle arguments about handguns. These 7 prove it often does the opposite. Number 7. The Remington R51. In January 2014, Remington unveiled a compact 9mm pistol at the SHOT Show floor in Las Vegas. The R51 was a revival of John Peterson's Model 51 from 1917. Built around an unusual hesitation lock where a separate breech block moves rearward inside the slide before camming out of engagement. Aluminum frame, fixed stainless barrel, 22 ounces, an inch wide, priced around $400. The gunwriters went to Gunsight Academy in Arizona to shoot pre-production samples. The reports came back glowing. Soft recoil, low bore axis, minimal muzzle rise, excellent handling for the size. Remington's own public statement afterward said that numerous experts had found the pistol to function flawlessly during testing. Then the production guns reached customers. Failures to feed, failures to eject, failures to return to battery. Some pistols fired before the action had fully closed. Owners who had waited months for delivery were sending guns back within a week. By July of 2014, Remington had halted production and offered every buyer a refund, a repaired replacement, or a trade for an R1 1911. Every single R51 sold was pulled back. The cause was not the Peterson action itself. It was tolerance stacking. Individual components measured within specification on their own. But when several parts each sat at the edge of their allowable range and were assembled together, the finished pistol fell outside spec. The prototypes had been assembled with care and close attention. The production line had not been set up to reproduce that. Remington fixed it. A second-generation R51 returned in 2016 with corrected tolerances, and it worked considerably better. But the single-stack 9mm market had moved on, the reputation damage was permanent, and the pistol was gone by the end of the decade. Here is what makes the R51's reliability score meaningless rather than merely bad. 2 populations of pistols carried the same model name, the same drawings, and the same marketing. One population was hand-attended. The other was mass-produced. The published number described the first group and was sold to buyers of the second. At least the R51's figures were internally consistent within each batch. The next pistol on this list posted 2 flatly contradictory scores at the same time, in the same trial, on the same guns. Number 6. The Heckler and Koch P7 M13. The P7 is one of the more elegant handguns ever put into serial production. Instead of a tilting barrel, it uses gas pressure bled from the bore into a cylinder beneath the barrel to hold the slide closed until pressure drops. The barrel never moves. Instead of a hammer or a manual safety lever, a squeeze-cocking lever built into the front strap cocks the striker when you grip the pistol and decocks it the instant you relax. The bore sits remarkably low over the hand. In 1984, Heckler and Koch entered the P7 family into the United States Army M9 service pistol trials at Aberdeen Proving Ground, competing against Beretta, Sig Sauer, Smith & Wesson, Walther, Steyr, Colt and FN. Now look at 2 results from that same trial. In endurance testing, individual pistols were fired out to 7,000 rounds. The Beretta 92 SBF and the Heckler and Koch P7 were the only two entries where all three of the test guns reached that 7,000 round threshold intact. Everything else broke something. In reliability testing, the P7 finished near the bottom of the field. In saltwater immersion, where pistols were submerged in a controlled saline solution and then fired, the P7 managed 86% successful firings overall, dropping to 82% after 5 days of exposure. The Beretta, the SIG, and the Smith & Wesson sat between 97 and 100% most durable, least reliable. Both true, both measured on the same guns, in the same summer. The explanation sits in that gas cylinder. It is a tight tolerance system that fills with carbon fouling, and a 10-day immersion cycle with no maintenance access is close to a worst case for it. Agencies that clean the gas system on a fixed schedule reported excellent service. The Department of Energy ran P7s in the dusty high desert of Idaho for decades and racked up enormous round counts. So the P7's reliability score describes the pistol bundled together with a maintenance assumption the Army selected in advance, then reported as a single figure. Change the assumption and the number moves, the P7 lost. The pistol that beat it went on to develop a reliability problem that the trial data had completely failed to predict. Number 5. The Beretta 92 FS, adopted as the M9. The Beretta 92 SBF and the SIG Sauer P226 were the only two designs to satisfactorily complete every phase of the 1984 XM9 trials. On mean rounds between failures, the Beretta posted roughly 1,750, the strongest figure in the field. For context, the worn M1911A1 pistols used as the control group averaged about 162 rounds between stoppages. Then look at the raw stoppage tallies from the same trials. The SIG P226 recorded 12 total stoppages, of which only one required an armorer. The Beretta recorded 20 stoppages, of which 9 required an armorer. By that measure, the SIG was the better pistol. Beretta won anyway, and according to the Government Accountability Office review, the contract came down to lowest total package price once magazines and spare parts were folded in. Now, the part the trials never saw. In September of 1987, during Naval Special Warfare training, the slide of a Beretta 92 SB fractured at the junction where the locking block mates into the slide. The rear section traveled backward off the frame and struck the shooter. It happened again in January of 1988 and again in February. 3 shooters suffered facial lacerations. 1 lost a tooth. 2 required stitches. By October of 1988, the GAO had documented 14 slide failures across field use and laboratory testing, with 4 shooters injured. Separately, routine lot testing turned up cracks in the rear of the frames. And the Army rejected roughly 12,000 pistols before Beretta implemented an engineering change in April of that year. The cause was contested. Beretta pointed at ammunition. Army metallurgists pointed at low metal toughness in the Italian-made slides. Some of the guns involved carried extraordinary round counts. One reportedly over 30,000 rounds, well beyond the 5,000 round service life the trials had required. The fix arrived as the 92 FS, with an enlarged hammer pin head that catches the rear of a fractured slide and stops it leaving the frame. Production shifted to the United States. The trial had measured the average correctly and had been blind to the tail. Averages tell you about the middle of a distribution. Injuries come from the edge of it, which brings us to the pistol the M9 replaced. It holds both the cleanest number in the history of American pistol trials and one of the worst. Number 4. The Colt M1911. On the 15th of March, 1911, an ordnance board convened at Springfield Armory for the final comparison between Colt's improved design and the Savage Model 1910. 6,000 rounds through each pistol, fired in strings of 100 with 5 minutes to cool between strings, cleaned and oiled every 1,000 rounds. When a gun got too hot to hold, it went into a bucket of water. John Browning attended personally and had supervised the assembly of the Colt test guns himself. The Savage recorded 37 malfunctions and 13 parts replacements. The Colt recorded 0 malfunctions and 4 parts replacements. The board's own conclusion was that the Colt was more reliable, more enduring, easier to disassemble when parts needed replacing, and more accurate. The pistol was adopted on the 29th of March, 6,000 rounds, 0 stoppages. Nobody has beaten that headline in over a century. Now move forward 70 years. When the Joint Service Small Arms Program ran its trials to find a replacement, the M1911A1 was fired throughout as the control weapon. It averaged around 162 rounds between stoppages, with 220 stoppages recorded in total, and the control frame gave up somewhere near 3,500 rounds. Same fundamental design, from perfect to bottom of the table. The explanation is not that Browning's design decayed. Those control pistols were worn, issued, decades-old guns pulled out of inventory, many in poor repair, and that was precisely the Army's own complaint about an earlier round of Air Force testing, where it objected that the Control 1911s were issued weapons rather than factory-fresh samples. Reliability is not a property of a design. It is a property of one specific gun with one specific history, measured under one specific protocol. The 1911 number and the 1984 number are both honest, and they are describing different objects. Now, some numbers are too low to trust. This next one was too high to be useful. Number 3. The Heckler and Koch Mark 23. In 1991, United States Special Operations Command began the Offensive Handgun Weapon System program, looking for a pistol built to a standard no-service sidearm had ever been held to. Colt and Heckler and Koch submitted designs. Colt was eliminated in the first phase. The reliability requirement was 2,000 mean rounds before failure. Firing both standard .45 ACP ball and higher pressure plus P ammunition, the Mark 23 averaged 6,027. One pistol in the test group reached 15,122. 3 pistols then ran a 30,000 round endurance test on plus P ammunition. The only component replaced across the entire test was the rubber O-ring around the muzzle, swapped at around 20,000 rounds. Afterwards, all 3 still grouped inside 2.5 inches at 25 meters. In accuracy testing, more than 450 groups from a fixture averaged 1.44 inches at 25 meters, with several groups measuring half an inch. The environmental testing was similarly severe. -25 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, mud, sand, and icing. 2 hours of seawater immersion at 66 feet, unlubricated. It was adopted as the Mark 23 Mod 0, and the first pistols were delivered on the 1st of May, 1996. Here is the number that does not make sense. Special Operations Command bought 1,950 systems at $1,186 each. That was effectively the whole program, the most exhaustively tested combat handgun ever built, and the total order would not equip a single infantry brigade. The reason is physical. The Mark 23 is 9.65 inches long, weighs 2.5 pounds empty, and approaches 5 pounds once the suppressor and laser aiming module are fitted. Operators nicknamed it the world's only crew-served pistol. Meanwhile, Heckler and Koch's smaller USP arrived, doing most of the same job in something that fit a normal holster, and the plus P ammunition the Mark 23 was optimized around was in short supply. A reliability score is only valuable if the object carrying it gets carried. This one was close to unbreakable and almost never taken along. The Mark 23's figures were consistent and unusable. The next pistol's figures argued with each other. Number 2. The Sauer M17 and M18. The modular handgun system contract was awarded in January 2017. The program measured two separate things: mean rounds between failures, meaning hardware damage requiring repair or replacement, and mean rounds between stoppages, meaning anything that interrupts the pistol but can be cleared by the shooter. The requirements were 5,000 for failures and 2,000 for stoppages. With the special purpose ammunition the program had selected, the results were strong. The full-size M17 demonstrated 8,929 mean rounds between failures and 1,923 between stoppages. The compact M18 came in at 8,333 and 2,155. With ordinary ball ammunition, the picture broke apart. The M17 demonstrated 6,944 mean rounds between failures, comfortably above requirement, and 343 mean rounds between stoppages, roughly 1/6 of what was required. The M18 recorded 3,906 and 197. Ride those together. The pistol was outstandingly durable, and, on ball ammunition, was hiccuping constantly. Those numbers are describing the same gun on the same day. The detail that reconciles them is buried in the test report. The dominant stoppage was the slide failing to lock rearward after the last round in the magazine. 60 of the M17's 120 stoppages, and 63 of the M18's 85. The shooter still has a functioning pistol in hand. What they have lost is the visual cue telling them the magazine ran dry, counted strictly by the protocol that registers as a stoppage. Experienced on the firing line, it lands very differently. Separately, the report documented double ejections, where an unfired round was thrown clear alongside a spent case, with the frequency rising as round counts climbed. The Army formed a dedicated team in July 2017 to trace the root cause, and modifications followed. Testing also identified a drop-related discharge condition, which prompted design changes to the trigger group before general fielding. Then, in 2019, a lot acceptance test ran 3 M18 pistols to 12,000 rounds each. The standard permitted 12 stoppages at 5,000 rounds. The result was 0, 197, then flawless, on the same platform inside 2 years. The M17 and M18 remain the standard sidearms across the United States Armed Services. The wider P320 family has also remained the subject of continuing public debate. Agency review and litigation regarding uncommanded discharges, with the manufacturer disputing those findings. That argument is ongoing and worth following on its own terms. What the trial data shows plainly is simpler. The single word, reliability, was being used for at least two different phenomena, and the two of them do not move together. Which brings us to the number that launched the modern service pistol, and still reads like a transcription error. Number 1. The Glock 17. In 1980, the Austrian Bundesheer went looking for a replacement for its Second World War-era Walther P38 pistols and published 17 criteria for the new sidearm. 9mm, high capacity, light and drop safe from 2 meters onto steel. Gaston Glock was running a small manufacturing company in Deutsch-Wagram producing polymer components, field knives, and entrenching tools. He had no firearms design experience whatsoever. What he did have was deep knowledge of injection molding, and the sense to ask people who actually carried pistols what they wanted. He assembled a panel of military, police, and competition shooters, and worked from their answers rather than from tradition. A working concept came together in roughly 3 months. The patent was filed in April 1981. The first test samples went to the Austrian Army in March 1982, labeled simply B1 through B5. Because Glock was a complete unknown, the Army imposed a screening test before the actual trials would even accept the entry. Fire 10,000 rounds. Suffer no more than 20 stoppages. The pistol had one. One malfunction in 10,000 rounds from a company that had never built a firearm, submitted against Steyr, Heckler and Koch, Sig Sauer, Beretta and FN Herstal. The Army's response was to raise the bar further, requiring the Glock to fire 25,000 rounds in the endurance phase, where established entries fired 15,000. It won regardless, and the contract for 25,000 pistols was signed at a bid roughly a quarter below the competition. The reason the number holds up is unglamorous. The pistol had around 34 parts. There is no hammer, no decocking lever, no external safety catch, no magazine safety, and no barrel bushing. Fewer components means fewer things to break, and generous internal clearances mean fouling has somewhere to go, instead of somewhere to bind. Simplicity was the engineering strategy, not a cost saving. It kept holding up. In 1984, the design passed NATO durability testing, and Norway adopted it, followed by Sweden. In 1987, the Miami Police Department's armorer dropped a Glock 17 from a helicopter at 400 feet. It broke the front sight. The pistol still functioned. Established European makers assumed the Austrian numbers were a fluke. They were not so. What actually connects these 7 pistols?